Hello, CBS juniors and primary class. I am Miss Rachel. I am over the juniors class. If you don't know me, you probably are in Miss Stacy's class. So we had come up with the idea that we could come into your home and review our Bible study with you guys while you're at home. Like maybe in your pajamas. I don't know, maybe. We just don't want to miss our time studying the word with you and talking about it with you. And so using the internet and video, we have the opportunity for you to do church and Bible study and just worship at home alongside you with a video, which is so exciting. So this week we went over lesson 25 and 26 as a combination. We did them together. This was a week where we did two lessons. So in lesson 25, we learned about how Moses was asked by God to speak to a rock to bring water. Now Moses was really angry and kind of tired of the people. The people were mad at him. They had risen against him. And he had just had it. So he went to the rock like the Lord had told him to do. But instead of talking to the rock or speaking to it to bring water, he hit the rock 2 times in anger to bring water. And God was still very faithful and brought water to supply the needs of the people. But because of that act, Moses wouldn't be allowed to cross into the promised land. Aside from learning about this, we also learned that Miriam died and Aaron died. So there was a lot of unrest among the people. Things were changing. God was raising up another generation to cross over the Jordan. And one of the things we see here is once again, the Israelites grumble and grumble and grumble. Instead of turning their hearts to the Lord and praying, they just kept grumbling. We've read about this all year long. They just keep grumbling, huh? Can you imagine? What does your mom do when you grumble? I mean, I'm a mom and I don't put up with it too long, but God is so faithful. And despite their grumblings, he takes care of them, he leads them, but they still have consequences, just like when you do with your mama. Yeah, it's such a bummer. And it's not the best that God has for us, is it? So now let's jump over to lesson 26. So in lesson 26, we talked about the king of Moab and how he was really worried about the Israelites coming and taking over his land. So he had heard of this man, Balaam, who had all this magic and powers. And he said he sent some of his royal princes to go and find him, and he offered him money. And at first, Balaam was going to go, and the Lord came to him and said, don't do it. The Lord spoke to him in a dream and said, don't do this. Go and speak my words. And so he had sent word back to the king of Moab saying, I'm not going. Well, the king of Moab kept sweetening the deal and offering him more and more. And so finally Balaam's like, yeah, it's totally worth it. I'll do it for this money. So he gets on his donkey. He goes to ride. And at one point, the donkey just wouldn't go. Well, there was an angel before the donkey. And this angel had a sword. Well, the donkey could see this. And the donkey was like, I'm not going past this guy. So the donkey's kind of rearing up and backing up. And Balaam is hitting the donkey and yelling at the donkey. And the donkey falls against a wall and hurts Balaam's leg. And then Balaam is like mad. He just is like, we're doing this. He's yelling at his donkey. And guess what totally happened? God gave the donkey the ability to speak. Can you imagine that? And the donkey said, why are you hurting me? Haven't I always been good to you and done what you've asked? And Balaam thinks about it and he's like, you are mocking me. You're mocking me. But I think he also knew he'd also been a good donkey up to that point. So maybe he's starting to wonder what's going on. Well, then Balaam's eyes are open and he sees the angel that's there with a sword ready to stop him. Now, going back to when the Lord had spoke to Balaam, he had told him he would speak blessings. Well, Balaam is hired to go speak curses. So now he's before this angel of the Lord and he sees, oh, I've got to do right. So he repents and says, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And he goes to the people and he speaks blessing over Israel. Now, the king of Balak was so mad at what he had done, but Balaam had listened to the Lord. Balaam had listened to the Lord, despite even probably fearing the king of Moab. He had learned who God was, and Balaam's heart was to hear the Lord first. So our wrap-up summary for this is prayer. So we've learned in lesson 25 how there's grumbling, and the people actually raised up kind of like a riot or a big crowd against Moses. And they did that instead of going and sitting at the Lord's feet and praying. And then on the other hand, we have Balaam over here, who it's not so much that he wasn't praying, he didn't know the Lord. He wasn't listening, but he was learning to listen to the Lord. So that brings us to 2 points. Praying is speaking to God about our worries and our concerns and our fears and the things that we don't like, but it's also listening to the Lord. So there was a man named George Mueller, and he had it on his heart to start an orphanage. And guess how much money he had to start his orphanage? He had 50 cents. Yep, he had 2 shillings. He had 50 cents to start an orphanage, but he did it anyway. He moved forward and he prayed for God to bring the money, and God kept bringing the money, and God kept bringing the money. Well, what this did for George is he became this man of prayer. He realized that when he prayed, God moved, and it maybe wasn't in what he expected, but he moved. So he would pray and listen and wait. And George Mueller started these orphanages and was caring for these kids. Sometimes they wouldn't even have food, and he would teach his little orphans to pray. And there was many instances when they would be praying for food at the table together, and a baker had showed up at one point with extra bread for the children. And then another time they were praying for food, and it just so happened that a milkman's carriage had broken down, and he was coming to offer the milk to the children. So I want to encourage you guys, some of the things that we've learned in these lessons will carry us through our whole lives. And those things are talk to God, listen to him, be ready for him to move, and do what he asks. And then we have the peace of the Lord. So I hope you guys have had a great week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Okay, talk to you later. Bye-bye.